Welcome to episode 10 of the DWRD Net stationery feed. My guest today is Chad of Eel and Anchor. Chad, welcome, and to get us started, just give a brief introduction of who you are and what you do.
So my name is Chad. Some of you may know me as Eel and Anchor. I pour resin blanks, occasionally some dice. The other thing I'm known for is pens and coffee. Been yelled at quite a bit for that. And I've worked for Van Ness on and off here for the past couple of years. I'm local to them. And newly the president of the Arkansas Pen Club, so will be helping run the Arkansas Pen Show in 2026.
Okay, that is a perfect introduction, and let's get into my kind of intro questions I'm asking everybody. And this one I'm sure will be an interesting one for you, because obviously one of the currently inked is probably in your cup of coffee. But to start out, what do you currently have inked? What have you been writing with lately?
The answer is a good chunk of what's in that box, so 80, 90 pens. It's everything from some Twisbees to a ton of maker pens to the Bumblebee Namiki that just took a bath. I've been yelled at many times for putting that because apparently there's felt in the cap. Whatever. It'll survive. It's coffee. I said, some maker pens. That was a Mad Science, Newton, Skogsy, both of these out of my blanks. Got Scribo down here. This is my new Bocamundo Prospector that I've been just in love with an M1000 Kadachi nib by Matthew Chen. And like I said, a bunch of Twisbees, a bunch of pilots, sailors. I mean, you name it. I've probably got it in that box back there.
No, and the next question I was going to ask is, if you had no budget, what's your Grail pen? But you just listed a bunch of people's Grail pens, and that
hands
the
down,
Bocamundo, the Prospector, I think that qualifies. So that kind of answers that. And I'm going to ask some more questions about that later on. But
sure,
I can't wait to see that one in person. But what about inks? What are your general ink preferences? Do you stick to like the same brands, or do you like to play with all the brands, or make a variety of colors?
I will use just about any brand. There's a few I won't for a variety of reasons. Because of my inking habits, I will leave pens inked for a year or more. So I like to eyedropper things because I will get sick of an ink and just want to dump it out, and I will dump back into the bottle. Again, I am a perfect example of, don't do what I do. I'm pretty fast and loose with the rules of fountain pens. Color, like, I just like playing with different colors. So right now I'm kind of in a big blue phase again, which I haven't been in for a while, as well as some teals, which I surprisingly have never been in until recently. A couple of months ago it was pinks, lots and lots of different shades of pinks, and then it was purples and shimmers and sheeners. I mean, you name it. It's really into a chroma shader phase for a while, but a lot of those tend to be a little bit drier, and I get frustrated with them because they dry out on me, and I'm swapping pens so frequently. So, just ask me tomorrow.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. And now, some of your crazy pens, like your Namikis and whatnot, do you go to the level of trying to eyedropper those? Or do you eyedropper more of your maker pens, or ones that are more meant for it?
If they are capable to be eyedroppered, then yes. I have a few that can't because they have metal internals and whatever. But I think 3 or 4 of the pens that are sitting here out of the 6 can be, so they are. And again, it's easier to clean. I hate cleaning pens, so if I can just dump it out and flush it with some water, it's a lot easier for me than trying to rinse out a converter. Or like, I know people love piston fillers. I hate them because they take forever to clean. And I'm switching.
And that makes sense. That's why I think I became such a quick fan of the Opus 88 pens. I can shut off the eyedropper, but it's a little bit cleaner of an eyedropper in some ways. But so that's 2 of the big 3. Paper. Are you a paper purist of certain brands, or do you use all papers? What
all
are you
day
writing on?
Irrifil is my go-to, and I would kill for a good notebook like this, like a hardcover notebook in Irrifil, and they don't exist, and it's frustrating because I love that paper, and I need to just hunt down someone who can make me a bunch of notebooks because I keep getting burned by TR, and I'm just over it.
Yeah, that seems to be a more commonly heard or read sentiment in the stationery world of Tomoe River, and I think Brad said this on the Pen Addict one day. If they would have made the new paper and ditched the name, there would have been no issues. But trying to reuse the name and then make a different product really led to where we are today.
Yep.
And then my final of the kind of opening question that has actually become one of my favorite questions to ask. What is your favorite stationery adjacent item? So like a messenger bag, a lap desk, a book weight. What would fit that bill for you?
Two things. I am a big rickshaw, Sinclair or Fillmore person. I have several, and I can fit close to 20 pens in there because I don't care if my pens touch. So it fits my I want a lot of pens. This dog's named after Avinta Inc. for what it's worth. She was abandoned in the Van Ness parking lot. Her name's Tala, and so she decided to show up. She gets her little moment in the sunshine. So I really like the rickshaw stuff because they can take a beating, and I'm rough on my stuff, and they can fit a lot of pens. And then I like carrying around like a little. This handkerchief goes with me. I mean, it's covered in ink because with eyedropper pens, I toss my rickshaw in my bag. I have inky caps, so they're inky sections, so I need something to wipe stuff off with. Because for me, as expensive and as nice as some of these are, they are tools. They are pretty tools, but they're meant to be used, and I'm not afraid to let them have a life.
No, and that makes perfect sense. The other day I filled a pen, and I was at the coffee shop, and I was like, oh, I'm at the end of my journal. I should write down, use the last couple pages that aren't really usable, write down everything I had, and I had 15 pens in my Sinclair. And one of them I had just inked, and when I uncapped it, it was pouring out because I had changed nibs, and I think the feed wasn't set right or something. So at the Starbucks I was at, there's now a blue spot on the table that next time I go there, I'll be interested to see if it came off any better when they use cleaning solution versus my napkins that were on the table and my little shop paper towel I had in my rickshaw. But so let's get into more about, your part of the stationery world. Before we get into Eel and Anchor, just kind of talk about, when did you get into pens? How long have you been in this hobby, this community, and kind of what got you started down this path?
Through probably pushing 4 years now, if I were to guess. And it came about. I'm a big D&D nerd, as the book's behind me, and decided I wanted to run a game. I had a bunch of friends that wanted to play. I wanted to run. So I offered to run a game, and the next immediate thought I had was, I am going to write this story by hand. I wanted to do it analog and in fountain pen. I'd never used a fountain pen before. Fountain pen. I don't know where that thought came from, but it was in my head. Immediately went online, did some poking around at my favorite author who I knew used fountain pens. He said he used a Lamy 2000 as a workhorse. I ordered a Lamy 2000 broad off Amazon. It was a double broad, and here we are. I think I did the math, in like the first year and a half, first 2 years, I was averaging a pen a week. It was bad. I've slowed down some, but it's bad. I'm glad my wife enjoys using my pens as well, because it gives me a little cushion to say, but look at how fun this one is when you use it,
So a follow-up question then, since you are in the Little Rock area, how long did it take you to realize that you have a wonderful shop within driving distance of you?
A few months. A coworker of my wife loves Lamy, and he's got I think a couple Lamy 2000s, and he just said, hey, there's a brick and mortar pen shop just down the street from me. And I said, oh, really? And I walked in, and my first experience with Van Ness was meeting one of the few times that Mike Van Ness is standing behind the counter. So I got to experience if you ever get a chance to meet Mike, you will understand he is a very interesting person. He doesn't say much. And he sold me a couple Lilliputs. And then shortly after, I had bought, I don't even remember what I had bought, but I went down to the store looking for ink, met Lisa, and we spent the next 2 hours going through swatches trying to pair an ink with the pen, and it went downhill from there.
No, and that's great, because the first time I went to Van Ness, which was the end of 2013, Mike was behind the counter, and he sold me my Sailor 1911 Black Luster, and then Lisa helped me find my Ockerman number 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, even though I have, Gentleman Stationer now that Joe's opened a store local to me, Vanessa is always kind of like my unofficial home store because that's where it all kind of started. So I love that because Mike is great to talk to if you get a chance to talk to him. Because nowadays he's mostly in the back doing shipping and whatnot. But it's always great when I get to make it down to Little Rock and talk to Mike and see what random new pens or inks, like his collection of the little sailor Shalanas, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. The quirky little pins that are just I had never heard of until Mike's like, "Oh yeah, I've got 4 or 5 of these Shalanas here."
Next time you're there, ask him to show you his prospector. He has one of the very first prospectors made, like a prototype prospector. It's
I'll
a big
definitely have to do
old,
that.
just honking crystal clear plastic, like just it's a prospector, but when you start looking at it, it looks odd because you can tell Sean's still figuring out what he wanted to do with it.
So you got started with Lamy, kind of the down the path. At what point did you kind of branch out into the maker pins? Because you have quite a few maker pins of different makers small around. Because that'll lead into talking about how you got into the blanks and pouring. But when did you get start seeking out pins by independent pen makers?
It would have been my first pen show. So I had gotten into pens, would have been like November or October, kind of around that time of year. A few months later, found Van Ness and the Arkansas pen shows in March, and I must have been there like January, February, and they had a little flyer for the pen show and the pen club. So I looked up the pen club, and I happened to go to my first pen club meeting was literally the week before the pen show. So when I go to the pen show, they made me a name tag that said Chad New Guy because they didn't know my last name, and I've kept that moniker in the pen club ever since. Just because I think it's funny. I've got on, you can't see it above me, but Michael Saul, actually, I've got him to write Chad New Guy, and I framed it and put it on my wall because I love it.
Oh, that's cool.
But so I went to the show, got to meet Sean for the first time. I bought, I think, 3 pens from Sean at the show. I bought 2 or 3 pens from Derail's Pens. Alphys is just the sweetest man you'll ever meet. If you ever get to find Derail's Pens at a show, go talk to him. You'll sit there and talk for an hour and keep seeing stuff at his table that you want, and you'll just keep buying. So yeah, I bought a couple. I think I bought 5 or 6 maker pens at the Arkansas Pen Show, and that just kind of made me start poking around on Instagram. And I stumbled onto Mad Science Pen Company before he got kind of really sought after the way he seems to be now, and was able to scoop up a bunch of his pens, and I just keep happening to run into makers and meeting them, and then they'll send me pictures of the stuff they're working on, and I will say how much, and things show up, and I put ink in them and add them to the pile.
No, that's great. That's a cool way to kind of get into it and get started in that way. But so one thing, you have all these pins. You mentioned your first one, and it was inadvertently a double broad. But do you tend to stick to the broader nibs because you like the ink color showing, or do you? I know you have tons of grinds. Oh, actually, let's talk about that. So, of your pin collection, how many of your nibs are custom ground at this point?
Yes, a lot. I don't know the number. It's high. I know at the Arkansas Pen Show, I had 30 plus this year in my pile to show people that were ground. It's probably in the 40 to 50 range. I would have to go through and count. The vast, like all but 2, I think, are done by Matthew Chen. Just because he's the nib grinder who comes to the Arkansas Pen Show. So I take advantage of that. But I do tend to lean more towards bigger nibs because I do like the different inks and I want to see more of the ink characteristics. I only have 2, maybe 3 fines in the collection, 1 extra fine, and I have those solely to show people what they are. I like to teach people about pens, like who are new. I want them to be able to experience everything because I know I have the fortunate situation that I can buy the stupid stuff. And then if you're interested in, like, maybe this is my grail pen and I'm going to save up for it, you can try it before you buy it. Because I know a lot of people who saved up for a fairly expensive pen and got it in hand and just hated it because it wasn't what they expected.
And I appreciate that, because at the pen show, when I got kind of drafted in at the last minute to help alongside Lisa of Olive Octopus do a table, the Middle Tennessee Pen Club kind of helped on the After Dark. You were at the table next to us and had all your pens out, and kind of glancing over, you see people who are like, "Wait, what pen is that? Oh, you want to try it?" Just the look on their face and the shock of people, you handing out these pens that some people, it might be their Grail, or getting to write with a ground monarch or things like that. That just really doesn't happen in some places, and your willingness to let them try that was appreciated. You could tell that just seeing facial expressions really said a lot to that.
It's why I did it. I was fortunate enough that I met a couple really great people who were not afraid to let me try things early on in the hobby, and I know how that made me feel and how that made me want to stay in this hobby and in this community. And so I do my best to kind of pass that on. 2 years ago at the pen show, I had a father and I think his 8-year-old daughter were sitting at my round table, and they had never been to a pen show before. I think he had like a Twisby or something, and I handed him my King of Pen and said, "Here." And then I said, "Please let your daughter write with it. Like it's a pen. Please try it. Like you hear about this pen all the time."
Okay, I should be able to get a little bit of clean edit. We had a little technical difficulty there, but so you were handed your King of Pens, and that was great to let someone who's brand new write with one of those almost unobtainium pens. But I was saying, there's some pens, it seems like many people purchase them from the manufactured idea of owning the pen.
Yes.
Not knowing how it writes. Some people might spend a couple $100 on a pen and then be disappointed. Like Lamy 2000, I love mine, but it's not for everybody. If you can find the sweet spot with how you hold the pen and how you write, it's great. Not everybody does, and that's a priceable. That's a rather expensive purchase for someone to get into, and then if it doesn't work for their writing style, that could be quite a disappointment.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't tell you the last time I've inked up my... No, I do know, only because I brought it to the pen show for people to try, but my Lamy 2000 rarely gets use anymore. I like it. It's nice. I do enjoy it. But it's a double broad. It's obnoxiously large. It's not my most comfortable pen. I understand why others like it, but it's not my favorite. I have dozens of pens that I'll take over that pen any day of the week. Again, I'm kind of lucky that I can make those boneheaded mistakes, and I will keep it to show others so that, like you said, like a couple $100 on a pen can be stupid. Like, let's be real. Like, we're in a hobby that is very, very silly when you can buy a big old bag of Bics and they'll do the same thing, right? Like, but
no, definitely,
just it's kind of what it is. So I like to show people what they're getting into before they buy.
No, definitely. So at what point did you transition into, being a pen consumer, an enthusiast, to wanting to pour blanks? How did that transition come to be, which kind of led to Eel and Anchor becoming a thing?
The same dumb way I got into this hobby to begin with. I decided it was like Black Friday, I wanted to make dice for my D&D party because we had been going for several years and I really appreciated them sticking through it all. And so I went and I bought all the stuff to make resin dice on Amazon, messed around forever trying to figure out how to make dice, made dice. And I was talking to Sean. For those who don't know, Sean Newton is more or less local to me, and him and we talk all the time about everything pens and in between. And we kind of came to this idea, like, you do realize that pouring dice is the same thing as pouring resin for pen blanks. It's just a different shape. And I said, yeah, it is. So I bought some more molds, bought the proper resin, and I was talking a lot to Jason Neal from Jason Neal Penworks, and Jacob from Mad Science, and John from Hello Tello, and kind of getting their ideas on what would be cool for resin blanks. And they kind of gave me some pointers from what they had seen other blank makers do. A couple of them make their own blanks, so they said, hey, just avoid these kind of little mistakes. And I started pouring blanks. I sent those guys and Sean a handful of my blanks to test to make sure they could even be turned. I got back a couple pens with some questionable flaws in the resin and some very valuable feedback, and I just started pouring. And I don't keep recipes. I literally throw stuff at the wall to see what sticks. People ask me like, "Hey, do you know what you did for this?" Nope, I don't. I'm sorry. I can kind of pick out the colors I made and I can try to remake it, but I like to just go and just mix stuff up and see what happens. Sometimes it works. Sometimes I've got 40 or 50 blanks out there that will never see the light of day because they are god awful.
So when you're and not really knowing about blank pouring, and you're one of the first interviews, or actually the first interview of a blank pourer per se that I've had on the show. When you're doing colors, are you able to source colors in the right family? So can you get a light blue? Can you get a teal? Or do you have to get more primary and mix the colors before you actually put in the parts to do the resin pouring?
So you can color your blanks a couple different ways, and I use both just depending on what effect I'm going for. You have a whole bunch of different liquid dyes. Those tend to be, for me, at least the dyes that I've come across. And I mean, there are so many dyes out there that, like, I'm sure there's stuff that could do the things that I don't do with it because I'm not going to spend a ton of money. I don't have the space for it. But so you got a bunch of different liquid dyes I use mostly for transparent blanks, and they come in every color that you could imagine. And then for my solid colors, I tend to use mica powders, and again, they come in every flippin' color you could ever want, and then some. And there are so many different brands and makers of both dyes and mica powders that you really, I don't think there's anything that you couldn't find with a quick Google search. I tend to try to not look too deeply because I'm a 40-year-old man with 4 to 5 pounds of glitter in my garage, and I'm just like, how did I get here? There's just so many
Thinking about
cool
5
colors.
pounds of glitter, and if that were to fall, that just is, it's a thing of nightmares.
My car, when I'm on like a pouring bender, my car has like a legit amount of chatoyance on it because of the glitter that is just kind of oversprayed onto the. It's so dumb. It's so bad.
So, Eel and Anchor, how'd the name come to be?
So I grew up with a father who was a scuba diver. There may or may not be a very large, like truck-sized anchor sitting in my parents' front yard. And he may or may not have almost lost a finger to an eel while diving because he tried to coax it out of its hole by doing like the little wiggly finger thing in front of it. I would love to say that my dad's a smart man, but I'm very much like him, and I cannot say that I'm a smart man. So, the apple did not fall far from the tree. So I wanted a tattoo, like a nautical tattoo sleeve, and so I had gotten an Eel and Anchor tattooed here, and I was trying to come up with a name, and I looked down at my arm, and I go, oh, that works, and yeah, I got somebody to draw it up for more of a logo-like thing, and here we are, a year and change later.
Do you have one of your stickers handy to show your logo? I know I have some somewhere from the pen show, but I didn't think to get one out. Yeah, and if you can see that there, and I'll put a, well, if you're not watching the video, if you're listening to audio, Chad does have a really cool Anchor, or Eel and Anchor logo with some different stickers. So, and then do you have your other sticker? The more important one, the pen and coffee cup.
Yeah.
Show that one as well.
I've been accused of being an agent of chaos, and so yeah, we have a mug of coffee with a pen in it. And honestly, like I do the pen and coffee thing for two reasons. One, people are terrified to touch their pens sometimes, and I understand, like, these are expensive things and treat them nice, but they are more durable than you ever give them credit for. I had a vintage guy tell me once when he handed me a vintage pen and he could see I was nervous. He said, look, this thing survived 2 world wars. There's nothing you can do to it that it hasn't seen. It's like, that's a very valid point, right? Like, yes, you can damage your pens 100%, but they are, at the end of the day, they are plastic, and plastic is pretty durable in most instances. And then a lot of it is just people freak out about what others do with their stuff, and it's just why. So I will continue to do it because it's not a big deal. It'll be fine.
I think it was on Instagram where I think was a Matthew Chin was putting his pin on cake or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So you had a back and forth, and that was quite interesting. Funny
Oh
to
yeah,
see the back and forth.
because I do it in front of him when he's in Arkansas, and it. If you ever get to meet Matthew, you understand it. It's too fun to just mess with him because he gets very skittish, I guess is the better word.
So with your blanks, you mentioned already a couple of the makers that you kind of talked to when you were getting started, but are there any official collaborations you've done? Have people sought you out to make certain blanks for a certain reason or certain promotion or certain um,
um, for
things
any
like that?
specific promotion, no, but I do have. I don't pour as often as I used to because I developed a resin allergy, so I have to kind of keep the pouring to a minimum. Otherwise, like I get like my nostrils get chapped and I get rashes. It's obnoxious, and that's with full face mask and like a Tyvek paint suit. But a lot of times I have makers that'll reach out and they're looking for something similar in style to what I've done, or they have an idea of something that they want and they say, "Hey, are you able to do this?" And if I can, I absolutely will. Uh, but if I can't, like I won't. Or if it's something that I feel I can't do as well as other makers, I'll say, "Hey, no, that's not like." When it comes to solid color swirl resins, I mean, honestly, like this one here, I don't do this very well when it works. Like in this case, it's because I got lucky. To be frank, I don't have that technique down, and I don't care to practice it because there are dozens and dozens of blank makers out there doing it better than me, and I'd rather play around with things that I haven't seen. That's why I did this one with like it's translucent blue with sparkle, like this copper swirl in it. Like to me, I love the way this looks, and you don't see a lot like this out there. So that's what I'm gonna make. Right? If you want swirly, solid stuff like this, I mean, you see this like there's lots of people, and I mean Brooks is kind of the poster child here. Like he does it fantastic. Go get a Brooks blank. So I don't, or Cocoon blanks or Stormwind, right? They're all doing that stuff way better than I ever could. So if like Sean asked me to do something similar to that a month back, and I said, "Hey man, like I could try, but it's not going to be what you're looking for." I know I don't have the capacity to do that. But then I have others, who reach out for very specific things that I've done in the past, and I think I do well, and those pens sell well for them. So I'm more than happy to do it.
No, and that's nice to hear because with you being a poor, it's adjacent-ish to the maker community, and the maker community seems to be very self-regulating, and they kind of watch out for each other. And that's great to hear you say, you know what, I could try this, but there's already this person over here who that's like one of their specialties. So go to them. Not everybody would do that. Some people might try, and then it might not be exactly what the maker wants, but then they might not want to say, this didn't turn out like I imagined. It's sometimes it's better to be upfront and say, you know what, I'm not your guy for this one. If you want to do this other thing, come back. But sometimes passing along to someone else who specializes in those little subsets, because there's so many different pen blanks and varieties and things like that. At this point, everybody's doing something similar-ish, but there are little things from a specialization standpoint that are really going to stand out or be harder to replicate. Like you saying you don't write down recipes, you can get pretty close, but if someone wants something exact, that's probably
it's not happening. Straight up,
right.
it's not happening. Sean and I both love how this blank turned out. I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to recreate this one and one very similar to it. I've never replicated this again, and it's so maddening because I sold him these batches of blanks because he wanted something. I think he calls it hot 90s. He wanted something Lisa Frank inspired. And it's like, oh hell yeah, I was a 90s kid. He happened to have to go to Van Ness. And he said, hey, I'll bring you your blanks. It was one of the first sets of blanks I had ever actually poured, especially in like a solid color style. And he's like, I know you want to see what they look like turned, so I'll bring them so you can see them. And I literally pointed to two pens in that batch and said, those are mine. I was like, man, I'm literally selling these blanks just to buy them back. And I've done that an unhealthy amount of time.
Well, that's a good problem to have, really. I mean, you're making a blank, and then you can say, oh, someone asked about the pen. Oh, it was made by this maker. Who made the blank? I did.
Yeah, I mean, it is a nice little marketing kind of thing. But yeah, I learned from Sean early that it's better to say no if you don't think you can do it. He learned the hard way when he first started making pens, and he was accepting any and all requests, and there are just some he's like, yeah, you can do it, but it's not worth the headache. That was echoed by a few other makers. Like I said, by knowing Sean and working at Van Ness, I got to meet a lot of makers and kind of demystified the rock star status that I think they sometimes have. Don't get me wrong, I love Sean's pens. I love a lot of the makers' pens, but they are just guys in their garage having a good old time with the lathe, right? Like they're not some super rock star that you can't approach. And it was nice to kind of have that demystified and get to talk to them and hear about yeah, you saw that pen that I made on Instagram. Let me show you the pile of broken dreams on the floor. Like I have on my workbench one of those giant plastic barrels for you get like a pretzel bites in. And it is my bucket of fails, and it is full to the top of failed dice, and even a blank that somehow, I don't know what happened, but it didn't cure properly, and it is curved like a banana. Don't know what I did to it to this day to make it just fail so miserably, but it's literally just a bucket of failed resin. And then I have 100 to 200 blanks that I tried to pour in the first summer that I was pouring resin in my unair conditioned garage, and they are holier than Swiss cheese because the resin was curing as I was mixing it. Like you see a lot of pretty things on Instagram, but man, every one of the makers out there I know has more broken parts and failed projects than they have successes, because it's just the nature of what we're doing.
And that's actually a question that I wanted to ask, because my limited exposure to resin, it was more like the costuming hobby and whatnot that I did in the past when people would make props. I know resin, 2-part resin or epoxy is very dependent on temperature, weather, humidity, and all that kind of stuff. So is that something that you were aware of when you first got into it, or is it just one of those things that you've had to adapt because, over time, so that way you're not, because I know resin, the materials themselves can be quite expensive at times. So were you able to pick up on that quick enough so that you didn't have an entire batch of resin that cured before you actually finished pouring?
I was talking a lot to Jason Neal at the time. I had met him at the Arkansas show, and super great guy, and he almost exclusively uses his own resin. And so I was picking his brain when I was starting with dice, before I even considered doing pen blanks. And he gave me a lot of the hard lessons he had learned specifically regarding temperature. And Sean did the same, because you had D Squared Arts Daryl on here. Those two are very good friends, and he's like, hey, here's some of the dumb stuff that Daryl and I learned when I got him into resin, right? So I did avoid some of the early learning mistakes, which was very helpful, because I think I just ordered a new batch of resin, and I want to say for like 2 gallons of resin, it was like $150 or something. Like, it's not cheap. You can get a good chunk of blanks out of there, but it adds up quick. But yeah, I thought I could make more, pour longer into the summer than I really could, but it's at baseline you have like 4 to 6 minutes depending on the ambient temperature of working time. But when it's 90 to 100 degrees in Kansas, you have 2 to 3 minutes of working time. And so when you start pouring out the resin and it literally has the consistency of peanut butter, you're done.
Yeah, and I just know that from using 2-part epoxy for random things in the garage or repairing stuff. Each part is fine. Once you mix it, that clock's starting, and you don't know what you don't know until the first time you screw something up, and you're like, oh, I got plenty of time to mix this resin up, and you go to put it on, and then it doesn't hold, it falls apart, so your 5-minute epoxy becomes 5 hours of redoing whatever you were working on. So
yeah,
very similar.
The resin that I use, it's a 2-part resin, and it's what most blank makers use. It's Alumalite Clear. It's a 2-part by weight, and when you mix it, if you go and you grab that plastic cup just a minute later, you can feel a noticeable increase in the heat, because it's I forget the scientific name for it, but the chemical reaction causes it to heat up, which causes it to cure. And so if the ambient temperature is warmer, that process goes a heck of a lot faster.
Do you pour into silicone molds? Is that
Yes.
how it works?
So you can do silicone molds. I know a lot of blank makers do. They have like steel pipes so they can get the longer blanks. I've thought about that. I might eventually do that because the silicone molds are pretty expensive. I have silicone that I could actually make my own molds if I so desired. I don't know why I haven't done it. It's out there. I could very easily go 5 minutes down the road to Home Depot and buy some pipes and make a setup where I could make my own molds. It's one of those things that someday, sure. Like I have a lathe out in my garage. At some point, Sean will come up here and we'll make a pen, and maybe I'll start doing that. But it's one of those, when it happens, it happens, you know.
So to circle back, you mentioned earlier, and I didn't think to ask at the time, vintage pins. Do you have any vintage, or are you mostly more maker and modern?
I have a few. Vintage tend to be a little bit too small for me, and the ones that aren't tend to be way more than I'm willing to pay. I don't use them very often because of my inking habits, and they're tougher to clean, and I could actually do something stupid to them and get a sack all crusty and have to replace it. And like, I know I have plenty of resources local to me that I could get that done. It's just, I'm not going to do that if I don't have to. And most vintage caps, their seals aren't as good as I need them to be, because I can pull pens out of that drawer that have been inked for a year or more. And that's just the way my collection is. And so I have 6 or 7 vintage pens, a couple Parkers, little no-name ebonite pen with a crazy vintage Goldfeet flex nib I got off Sean's scholarship auction. A couple things that are fun, and I'll ink them up and play with them every once in a while, but not very often.
So as we start to kind of wrap up, now that your involvement with the Arkansas Pen Show has changed, talk about that, because I know there's some new things on the horizon in those regards, specifically related to the 2026 Pen Show. So talk about what you're doing with the Pen Club now, how you're involved, and how that came to be, and how you think it might progress in the future.
Not entirely sure how it came to be. I was approached by a bunch of the club members Sunday night after the show, and they just kind of asked if I would be interested in running for the board and kind of help. And the board is who effectively runs the show. And I think, honestly, most of them have been in the club and running the show for a long time, and I think they're ready to take a break. It's not an easy thing. And I've always felt that we could, I love our show. It's a small show. It's a friendly show. It's a lot of fun. And I think there's lots of little ways that we can kind of improve it. And so I said, sure. And actually today, I just dropped off the deposit for the new venue. It's going to be at the Windham River front in Little Rock. So it's kind of on the border of downtown and North Little Rock. We're going to have a bigger venue. We're going to have a much bigger, more dedicated space for our roundtable event. And can't really talk too much about what we're thinking about changing as far as the event goes, because we're bouncing ideas off each other and trying to figure out what's feasible. Can we do it this year? Is it kind of like a multi-year planning thing? But we're definitely looking to bring in more stationery, and specifically kind of on the journaling planning side. We have very little stationery at the show, and we want to change that. I know it's Happiness Handmade. I believe you had her on this as well.
Yeah, she was episode 3, and I actually need to go to my mailbox when we're done here, because I have an order from her sitting in the mailbox of the journaling stickers.
She did really well and had a great time. We had the Letter Writing Society, who I think did really well and had a good time. So we have a little bit of stationery kind of stuff, but we don't really have enough, and so we want to fix that. Try to bring in some new makers that haven't been here, and I'm talking to a lot of makers who are interested. It's just it's too early for them to be able to commit. Obviously, spring is right. Our show's right around spring break, and some of them have kids, so you gotta kind of figure it out. But yeah, we like I said, we got the new venue, which is great. be around the same time next year. I think it's don't let me pull it up on a calendar so I don't say something stupid because I will. I can tell
No, while
you
you're
when
looking
it'll
that
be.
up, and the venue worked, but it didn't work the best. I know this year just things like room keys not working, little things like that, and then not having really any walkable like restaurants and things. So in the middle of the day, if you wanted to grab a bite to eat, the hotel restaurant not serving a lunch, that's kind of a big miss when you have an event like that where people might be getting there, but you have a captive audience. So little things like that are going to be a great improvement, I would say.
Yeah, we're literally the new venue is like a minute drive from uh, what's called the downtown river market. Lots of restaurants and bars. It's like the equivalent of a couple block walk into the North Little Rock Main Street, which again, full of lots of great restaurants and bars. Honestly, I spend a lot of time on that main street. That's where my barber is. There's a board game cafe that I spend a unhealthy amount of time at. They do an art walk, which might actually be the same weekend as our pen show, which would be kind of cool. So if you want to take a break and go walk and like check out some local artists, but it's just like physical location wise, it's better. It's also there's a big, just wide open kind of grass park next to the river. So if you just need to decompress and get away from people, if the weather's nice, you can go walk and sit by the water and just kind of chill for a minute, which is I know a lot of people kind of appreciate being able to get away from the crowd sometimes. But the
No,
show will
definitely.
be the weekend of the 20th, so Friday, March 20th through Sunday the 22nd of 2026.
No, that's great. It's good to hear because that makes sense when people like in organizations or clubs that you get to a point where you're ready for the next generation or the next group of people to kind of take over. So that's great that you were able to help, progress the show because the show, like you said, it's a small show. It is a very friendly show. It's a great hangout, but the vendors are also doing decent, for a small show.
Mm-hmm.
But paper, like I know when I got into the hobby, I didn't think about paper. I had a Rhodia tablet and that's all I needed. But paper and journaling and planning, it's almost its own separate bubble in the stationary world. And the lines are getting a lot blurrier and there's so much that each side of the hobby can learn from each other and you're crossing the streams. People who
Exactly.
don't know about papers, you know, they can learn from the journalers or like you said, Danielle, my wife is now keeping a bullet journal that she wasn't aware if that was really a thing. And
Well,
now
that's
she has her
awesome.
astrology with her Galen and you know, that was a great panel she went to and now she's gone in that whole direction and sticking to it. So there's little things like that that I think will be very beneficial, just from a vendor standpoint and a class standpoint, because not all the shows are doing classes, and that's one thing I like. There were panels, there were classes. Going to Sean's panel to hear him talk about making a pin or those type of things. I think that gives you something else to do than shop. There's only
Right.
so many times you can walk by that same table and be like, okay, this is the third time I need to go buy that pen now. But having other events or classes or the evening roundtables, that's going to be a nice aspect as well.
Yeah, we do. And this is one of those things I think will kind of build year over year. We do want to lean heavier into the classes. Um, just because we know that classes they're a big draw. And like you said, how many times can you walk that loop and just destroy your budget, right? Like at some point, you hope at least, if you're not me, you will have the adult common sense to walk out and stop impulse buying all the pretty shiny things. And having more classes not only helps you do that, but it also there's so many awesome things there. I mean, I didn't really check out the classes this year because I was helping Lisa and at Van Ness at her table, but I know like she had a lecture. I know we had several art ones. Sean had his maker lecture. I think Bob Dupress from Coral Creations was doing a blank pouring thing. I know when Michael Saul's able to make it, he's doing like his, here's how you can do calligraphy and Spencerian script. I think Nick Pang did like an all day thing on Sunday. And we know people love that and we want to kind of lean into that and get more of that. But we want to grow that reasonably. We don't want to plan too much and then bite off more than we can chew. We'd rather build it in stages. And the same thing goes for the roundtable. The roundtable event we've been doing for 2 years, and it doubled in size this year. And we were kind of floored because we didn't know what to do with it, and it was a little bumpy to get it running, and we didn't have the space we thought. So, but we want to make that a feature because everybody seems to love that and getting to get hands on with all these different topics and things and get to play with stuff and see things that you normally wouldn't. So the goal is to try to make the roundtable event a bigger, better event every year as well, and try to really make that kind of, a keystone moment for the show.
Definitely, that was one of my favorite parts, just to, to be able to assist in running a station, but also knowing that with more notice and planning, making it could be made better where you have a set number of people per group, so that when people go from station A to station B, there's going to be a seat for them. There's going to be a kind of repeatable experience. And also, I think that will help the show as a whole grow, because people want to come and they don't just want to shop. They want to do other stuff, and the classes and the presentations, that can be just enough to kind of tip that scale of, do I want to go to this show? And then,
right.
Hopefully
so
that
year,
is the case.
For those who were at the Arkansas show, or for those who may be wondering what the roundtable event is, we call it speed dating for pens. So last year and the year before, we did it kind of in the small restaurant-y kind of area. So the tables are small, and we were able to push some together, but it's not very conducive for the event. The event basically is we have a whole bunch of tables set up with a table host. So for me, I had literally 80 or so of my personal collection all inked and literally dumped on the table, so you could try all the different pens that you didn't know existed or never got your hands on. We had some art tables, we had some calligraphy tables, I think stationery table there. You were running the table, Lisa Olive Octopus, who was literally she had dumped her bag of swatches on the table. Just every aspect that we can think of that is in this hobby or kind of adjacent to this hobby, so people can see it. And you get 10-ish minutes or so at the table, and then someone yells, okay, go to your next table, and you move with your group, kind of speed dating like to the next topic. This coming year in 2026, we have a whole ballroom in the hotel dedicated to the roundtable event. We're going to have bigger, like the actual 8-foot round tables, so we can get more people around the table. There's going to be more room, so you're not tripping over each other. It'll be easier to move around just because we have the space that's we can design and lay out and not have to work around pre-existing nailed down furniture and tiny little 2-foot square tables. So if nothing else, the space will be better, which will make it run a lot smoother. But we hope to get some more people in there and get some commitments early, so we have everything kind of nailed down, because it's shown 2 years in a row that people love it and it's growing, and we'd be stupid not to continue to do it and try to do it as best as we can.
No, definitely capitalizing on what's popular and what's getting more people to come into the show. You always want to go down that path when possible. To get to the final question that I've asked for all of these, what's next for Chad and Eel and Anchor?
That's a really good question. For me, the resin pouring was always just a fun hobby as a creative outlet. So I kind of go in waves with it, where I'm pouring a whole lot and then I'm not pouring much. And I think right now, the resin pouring, I'm going to kind of keep it as is. If people reach out and they're interested in something, and if it's something I can do, I'm more than happy to do it. Whether that's like a batch of 6 or 12 blanks for a maker, or if just somebody wants a couple blanks for a custom pen, whatever it is, I'm always happy to give it a shot if I can do it. So I'll continue to do that. I do, like I said, I do have a wood lathe out in the garage, and I believe all the tooling I need to make a pen. I got a shopping list from Sean about a year ago and slowly been filling it out. So at some point, we've talked about potentially this summer he'll come up and I've made a pen in his shop, but I want to do it on a wood lathe and kind of figure that out. And maybe I'll start turning pens. But again, if I do, it'll be one of those, I'll turn a pen here or there, and I may put them up for sale. I may not. I don't know. It's for me, it's a creative outlet. I'm not doing it for the money. If I can pay for the hobby and cover its costs, which I have, I'm very happy. It's just, it's a kind of a net zero cost for me. So that makes things nice. And yeah, I think I'm gonna spend most of this year trying to focus on building up the show. I think we have a very unique situation where I think we can make the Arkansas show really awesome and really fun, and that's kind of been my goal. It's my home show, and I want it to be awesome, and I'm gonna try to do what I can to make it the best show it possibly can be. And I think I think we've got a lot of new people in the club who are very excited to kind of help, and I'm excited to see what that does in the future.
No, that sounds wonderful. And, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. I'll make sure Chad goes and looks if, you have suggestions or things you'd love to see at a small show. If you've been to the Arkansas show and there are things that you might want to, comment on, leave a comment or, reach out through social media and whatnot, because we'll have links to all of how you can get in touch with Chad in the video description and the show notes. But other than that, any final words, Chad? I really appreciate you taking some time to go through this, the blank pouring and the pen show and the timeliness of you being able to talk about the new location and for the show for next year was great. I'm glad how that worked out.
Yeah.
But any final words for anybody?
I mean, I like I said, it's a fun hobby, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad to be a part of this community. There's a lot of great people. I mean, I'm a part of a lot of different hobby communities, and a lot of them have a lot of really obnoxious gatekeepers, and you don't really find that here. There's a couple bad apples, like there isn't any big group, but honestly, most people they're super great people, and they're more than happy to show you their collections, tell you what they know, and I love being a part of it. That's why I've been in it for 4 years and involved on both just the kind of the front facing community, as well as kind of behind the scenes with helping with shows and with different vendors and makers and what have you. And I'm always happy to help somebody new if they've got questions or want to check things out. And that to me is the coolest part about this hobby, is seeing somebody new super excited about their preppy and watching that excitement and then opening up the doors to the absolute rabbit hole that this thing can be.
No, and I think that's a perfect way for us to end. So, once again, thanks to Chad from Eel and Anchor for taking some time to talk tonight. And don't forget to leave comments, if of anything you heard or anything you'd like to hear or suggestions for other guests for the future. Leave all that in the video comments, and I try and read and reply to every single one of those as I'm able. And don't forget as well that the audio version of this is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So for now, that'll wrap up episode 10, and thanks for watching.